Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Mridanga, Namo Namah, Jai Guranga, Jai Nishingadev. So we're going to pick up where we left off. We're still reading contents of the Gita summarized, text 7, and we were kind of 2/3 of the way through the purport. I was just looking through this again. So text 7 is, now I am confused about my duty and have lost all composure because of weakness. In this condition, I am asking you to tell me clearly what is best for me. Now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So the purport here, this word that we didn't really cover last time, and you see this being used a lot by Prabhupada, is this miserly man and miserly weakness is used. If you try to find those two words together anywhere on Google or anything like that, you only get Prabhupada using this, and it's a very unique pairing because to be miserly generally means, someone is tight-fisted, someone is, withholding things, or, not very generous with giving things out. Parents have $1 million in the bank and will give, $100 to their kids or something like that. Very miserly behavior, just keeping everything close and for themselves, essentially. If you have knowledge, you don't give it out to people. If you have money, you don't give it out to people. But what is that connection to weakness? Generally, you don't see those two pairings because they don't really connect. So the connection is, in the situation here with Arjuna too, it doesn't make much sense. Like, how is he being miserly? So is he unwilling to discharge his duty and he's being a miser because he won't unleash the wrath of his, bow and arrow upon his, kinsmen and kill them? So he's being a miser because he won't fight with his own family. That's one way of looking at it, but it's not exactly the definition that we're going for here, because it doesn't really make sense, obviously, when you read this miserly weakness. So you have to look at the word miserly very carefully in relationship to Krishna consciousness and in terms of sense gratification. So when you're entering into Krishna consciousness, in the middle of Krishna consciousness, or in more advanced stages, what is the main principle of Krishna consciousness? It's always to be distributing some form of mercy to people, some form of prasadam, some form of kirtan, some form of group congregational chanting, some form of preaching, glorification, discussing with Krishna, coming together and offering your prayers, offering lamps, offering everything, so many things to Krishna. When you're offering, that is the opposite of miserly behavior. You are offering rather than accepting. You are offering rather than, and you're also more humble than the straw in the street. Humility is building. So everything in Krishna consciousness is about removing the concept of being a miser. Now, when you have kind of uncontrolled senses, and when you are very materialistic or even minimally materialistic, excuse me, your propensity for accepting things for yourself, being proud, satisfying your senses, the process of sense gratification is very miserly, because you are not giving, but you are trying to use other people, other things, other animals' bodies, to eat, all these different things, other women. You are always exploiting one thing in order to satisfy your desires. So you're not giving, you're actually taking and receiving, whether that is, voluntary, or you're forcibly taking things in the material world for your sense gratification, doesn't matter. But you're in the reversed, situation here where in Krishna consciousness, you're always humble, you're always giving, giving, giving. Opposite of miserly in Krishna or in material world, you're very miserly, always thinking about and assessing the material body, assessing the senses, assessing through the mind, what do I need today to be happy? What can I get from my job? How much money can I make? With that money, what senses can I enjoy? Where can I go to enjoy those senses? What's the best way to enjoy those senses? All of this is miserly because it's putting you and your body at the forefront of everything. So, when Prabhupada is talking about this miserly weakness, the reason weakness is used here, and it does not necessarily go with the word miserly, as we're saying, the reason is because in this particular case, Arjun is showing a lot of weakness in terms of his inability to discharge his duties and understand what he is meant to be doing. The reason miserly is used is because he is describing himself in a way that shows to Krishna that he is not at the moment thinking about other people. He is not in a conscious mood of distributing mercy in his case, discharging his duties as a kshatriya and all of this glorious battle knowledge that he has and ability to win wars and things like that. So he's being very miserly because he's putting his sense gratification first. He's putting his family first. He's putting all of these things first and taking all of these things and taking that sorrow and taking that misery from the material world and taking his attachments to his family. So this is miserly. Things are coming in towards him rather than radiating out. If things were radiating out in a positive, healthy manner for Arjun's particular situation, he would be at the forefront of leading and waging this war. So I thought that was a very important point because it's, you can just read through these purports and yes, it kind of makes sense. Oh yes, miserly weakness, weakness of heart. But if you really, really analyze it, it's so deep what Prabhupada is trying to get across here. And it's such an unusual pairing that it almost, you would at the forefront, of my thoughts, I was thinking, well, I think Prabhupada might be incorrect here, or it's just, his use of the English language is a little unusual because it's a second language for him, or, they're just kind of colloquial sayings that they use in and around, the temples or things that they've picked up. But when I really kind of dive deep into it, thinking about it, I realized actually this is an extremely interesting pairing of two words that does very well describe the situation, but is not something that is generally used in the material world because the English language and all the languages are used by materialistic people who are all generally miserly and putting themselves first. Even if they think that they're putting others first, it's always still about their sense gratification. So the whole world is miserly, and a lot of them do show this weakness of heart as well, and it's a very interesting pairing. So continuing on with the purport, now we're using this new word here, the kripanas. So kripana means miserly person. It's used quite often, and this is why we're talking about this miserly kripana, is because the sense gratification, everything is coming in towards the jiva rather than radiating out. So when you're not Krishna conscious, generally you're considered miserly and a kripana. So the miserly persons waste their time in being overly affectionate for family, society, country, etc. Yes, so when you're materialistic, when you are identifying with the body and all of the things around you, you basically waste your time overly affectionate. So you have too much affection for family, society, country, animals, global warming, food shortages, overpopulation, depopulations, all these things are just considerations of a material world that ultimately is impermanent and wraps up at the end of Kali Yuga anyways. So for us to be, and everyone dies after 80 to 100 years, 60 years even. The fact that people are capable of showing so much interest in these things, in self-preservation, in the preservation of others, in the preservation of a world that they won't be here in this particular body to enjoy, is a testament to the immense power that Maya has to illusion people and to engage their senses so forcibly that they will spend their entire life, night and day, working towards things that literally have no importance whatsoever and keep you in that miserly position of constantly having things coming in towards you. And the trick of Maya is that they think, in one sense, a lot of them, that their work is good for humanity, that they will leave their legacy upon things, that this is important. And yet they think because we're doing, good things for the world, philanthropic, different, UNICEF and helping the people and food banks and all these things. So you think that you're giving out and you're not being miserly. But because you're still in the material concept of life, and because you as a jiva are still utilizing the outward flow to gratify your internal mind and senses, you're still a miser and you're not getting proper benefit for that. You may get pious credits to some extent, but that can, as the Christians do, elucidate, that can take you to heaven for a while and you can enjoy up there. But heaven, hell, and the material world and everything in between is still, unfortunately, wrapped up in a material sphere that is non-permanent and not really full of eternal bliss and knowledge. One is often attached to family life, namely to wife, children, and other members on the basis of, in quotations, skin disease. So this is definitely one of those things where Prabhupada's throwing in kind of a colloquial term here. But it's really funny, and I think he uses it almost to jab a little, to verbally joust, because it is a funny designation. And I think if you are truly a realized individual, a realized jiva, a lot of this stuff is pretty basic, pretty mundane, and almost ludicrous to someone who's risen above it. Because when you're looking at things from one perspective, say as a young child, things seem so vast and complex, and you have such a craving for knowledge and to understand things. And then when you do understand something, that it leads you to all these different paths and roads where your mind is being expanded so much, and it seems so insurmountable to kind of understand the material world. And many people never understand much about it, and yet these fully realized individuals understand how simplistic and mundane it actually is, and everything starts to come down to a very small point and perspective. And that main perspective is that you are not the body and you have a skin disease. You're identifying with the skin, with the flesh, with all of the things that are connected to it, that come out from it in the form of progeny, in the form of money and accolades and work. So this is a disease, and it's one that's very intoxicating and very difficult to get out of, because the material world and Maya can always overwhelm the jiva. So without the mercy and full surrender of the jiva to Krishna, and without the mercy from Krishna, you can never defeat Maya. So we don't need to also get down on ourselves, and we don't need to, be angry with other jivas as well with what they're doing, because you don't have the ability to control your mind and your senses, unfortunately. You can chant Hare Krishna every day, chant your 16 rounds, slowly purify. But through that process, you're always going to be falling down. You're always going to be having, difficulties with sense gratification. And you are praying to Krishna every day through that chanting of Hare Krishna to engage me in your service. And that means that you start doing whatever service. Maybe you cook for Krishna, maybe you try to learn Mridanga or teach Mridanga or preach a little bit to people. So you're engaging more and more in that service and becoming less miserly, because now you are putting Krishna ahead of your sense gratification in certain circumstances. And the more and more that you do that, eventually, a few rare souls will get the mercy of Krishna where he deems you fit to re-enter the spiritual realm, to realize your Swarup, and you will eventually be able to crest over Maya. The Kripana thinks that he is able to protect his family members from death. So this is what we're talking about too, this amazing power of Maya to engage people so strongly in the material world, even though they're all going to die. Every person has died. No one has survived, although there are quite a few talks and discussions about certain sages and certain individuals that still exist in the material world and have been living many thousands of years. But eventually, they too will wrap up their material bodies. They don't live forever here. So everyone is going to die and their bodies do degrade and perish. But the miserly man, because he's so absorbed in his own, sphere of knowledge, his own awareness of his senses, his mind, thinking that he is the body and needs to gratify it, the more that he builds his family as a form of protection, maybe it's physical protection, emotional protection, monetary protection, he thinks, oh, this will protect me from death. The creepiness thinks that his family or society can save him from the verge of death. Such family attachment can be found even in the lower animals who take care of children also. Just Prabhupada reiterating that, this is no different from animal life. Being intelligent, Arjuna could understand that his affection for family members and his wish to protect them from death were the cause of his perplexity. So Arjuna did understand that in this particular case, he was being weak, he was being miserly, he was placing himself and his attachment to his family first, but he did not understand how to manipulate his mind through sharpening his intelligence to get past this. And we all experience this. We all have different triggers, different things that happen to us in the material world. Sometimes once a week, once a month, every day, depends who you are, where you're at. But different triggers will happen that kind of lock your mind up for a while. You begin to perseverate over something and form a obsession with something or an anger over something for an hour or 10 hours or 2 days. And you have to slowly wait that storm out, not allow it to really manifest out physically, and allow the mind to dwell on the things that it wants to dwell on. And in the meantime, work on your intelligence to try to pacify the mind, try to connect more to the heart and the jiva in the heart to pacify the entire consciousness of the body and see a little bit more from a spiritual perspective. Eventually the mind, especially if you're chanting every day, will come back under control. You will be able to re-engage in your Krishna consciousness. And this is exactly what Arjuna is experiencing at the moment, these times where the mind and emotion have taken over to the point where the intelligence stops working and you're just not really capable of discharging any types of duties. You're stuck. And I feel like this, certain times each year where things happen, you have to kind of take a step back and reassess things and figure out what the next steps are, why you're feeling the way that you're feeling, how to deal with them, how to tolerate the situations, how to pacify the mind, how to sharpen your intelligence and move forward as well, and try to also gain enough knowledge through those triggers um, to try to catch the mind a little early next time as well, and try to have that thought process that you use to originally pacify the mind, have some of those same mantras come into your head about, oh, well, this is like this, or, I'm understanding that this is happening in order for me to learn this particular thing, or, this is just the trigger that I have and I need to learn to kind of get over it. And all of these different things that I read or experienced, I remembered last time and the mind was satisfied. So a lot of people, they just go through their lives, I find. So many people with no what's called deductive reasoning, no ability to look at the reality of things, what is happening, to look at a system of events, or scientifically, deductive reasons using all the time, because you're able to look at, if I do this, this, and this, then this happens. If I did this, this, and this, then that happens. If I did this, this, and this, then this was happening. And you gather enough data from that to make a conclusion of, well, if I do this, then that, but you might not know the exact answer, but you can deduce from data, from realizations, from certain things that are happening in your life. You can, become very aware and start to understand things that, you might not have been taught or told. So once you have enough data, you can deduce, okay, well, I see this pattern, and then I have this knowledge, and then I can figure out more patterns from that. So in order to have this deductive, process and awareness, you actually have to be a little conscious of things. And I find most people go through their lives very unconscious. They don't seem to be aware at all of their surroundings. They're not aware of themselves. They're not aware of how they're perceived or how they want to be perceived. They're not aware of how their actions affect other people. They don't seem to be aware really at all of anything. And why is that? Well, because most people are kripanas, very miserly. So everything for them is coming inwards. And this happens for a lot of devotees still as well. They sing kirtan, and you're supposed to be able to. So here's another realization. Like, why is it when I sit in so many kirtans, it's so difficult to try to chant kirtan with them or follow them? And it's because the process of kirtan is congregational chanting for Krishna and for the distribution of the holy name, and to associate with devotees. Now, if you are still very much a miserly devotee, and you're sitting there with a big ego trying to impress whatever girl, or trying to, show off for your Instagram live feed as it's streaming, then it's very miserly. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that you are trying to take actually energy from people, take energy from Krishna. Things are coming in towards you rather than radiating out. So the people surrounding you, they're not getting anything from the kirtan, nor can they engage with it, because you aren't giving anything to them to engage with. You're actually sitting there trying to take from them. And you can feel that. And the whole process is the reverse of what it's supposed to be. And that's why the kirtan standards really need to be addressed. And this is an easy thing. You can sit down with anyone in a couple minutes, rectify this behavior, because it's very easy to sense and to see and to feel. And not just the singers, all of the people involved in the kirtan as well. It's something that if you really address with people, they would either leave, which would be not ideal, but a lot of people egos, will take time to kind of break down, and they might say, oh, well, the hell with this. I'm not going to do kirtan anymore. That's fine. But the people that remain, with a little bit of coaxing and understanding of where they're going wrong. And if you actually are a devotee, then you want other people to step in and say, hey, like you can be better through this. Um, then that's really what you should always be looking towards, to have other people criticize you in a positive way. So you're doing a great disservice to so many of these devotees who are unfortunately on the wrong path, and there isn't a forum anymore for anyone to even say anything, and that's also part of this whole cancel culture and everything else, where Maya is raging on, Kali Yuga is raging on, and it's coming to the point where you're now not allowed to criticize anything, and everyone is to be accepted for everything that they offer. And Krishna consciousness, unfortunately, just does not work that way. And you also must surrender to someone of a higher authority and allow them to instruct you too. And the material world right now is kind of going in the opposite direction with this whole, as they say, creeping as very miserly behavior, all about me, my pronouns, I'm like this, I'm a man now, I'm a woman, I want to act like an animal, I'm a man that thinks he's a baby, like whatever. So, and we're told that we have to accept this. And really all it is people just discussing this, as Prabhupada says, the skin disease. So, although he could understand that his duty to fight was awaiting him, still on account of miserly weakness, he could not discharge the duties. So, basically, because of his attachment to family and his sense gratification, rather than his ability to be more transcendental at the moment, then he is incapable of discharging his duties. He is therefore asking Lord Krishna, the Supreme Spiritual Master, to make a definite solution. Okay, so like here is the problem. Now, what is the solution? If you have a proper spiritual master, then this is actually not that difficult of a process. Now, if someone really is, somewhat transcendental and acting as a spiritual master, then, like we said, things become very simple, very mundane, and very easy to address. And if you've gone through it all yourself as well, then it's easy to see what stages and levels other people are at and to give them some good advice. What happens in ISKCON is most of the people in positions of power don't have that actual vision. And they also micromanage and utilize inappropriately people for different smaller duties and things, and they just engage them almost mundanely and exploit a lot of people simply for manpower, prestige, number of initiated devotees under their belt or whatever. And they're not actually capable of and even if they are capable, because they're still generally miserly, if they're not transcendental, then their own sense gratifications will also kick in, and they're going to unfortunately exploit their disciples in one way or another. Or worse, if they do have enough potency to understand what to do, they may not actually help their disciples yet if they're still kind of egotistically driven, because out of pride, they don't want other people to also rise and shine above them too. He is therefore asking Lord Krishna, so he wants to stop friendly talks. He offers himself to Krishna as a disciple. He wants to stop friendly talks. So he wants, friendly talks. So when you actually want to get serious about something, it's like, okay, like we're not friends anymore. Let's get off that spoken platform. We are, disciple, guru disciple relationship here. Let's get off the friendly talks and get down to the serious business here. I want to know exactly what I'm supposed to do. Talks between the master and the disciple are serious, and now Arjuna wants to talk very seriously. So serious discussions, those have to happen also in a very safe space, because as a disciple, One, you have to be very sure that the person that you're taking knowledge from is has your best interests in mind, and so many times we've heard that that hasn't been the case. Two, the person also has to be advanced enough to understand how much the disciple can take, because it's very, very difficult. And I used to preach a lot to people, and I realized that this stuff's a lot more powerful than we give it credit for, because as we're in touch with it more and more, it seems normal to us. But if we ever remember how shocking and how hard this information hit when we were just regular, average people out of the material world and we started contacting this stuff, it was absolutely mind blowing. So when you're taking people, even if they are Krishna conscious or even if they're not, you always have to see where those people are at and very, very delicately address them in a serious manner. So although the conversation is very serious, you also still have to be delicate in your approach, because people have, as we were talking about, so many triggers. And it doesn't take long to trigger someone, and immediately their mind will lock up, their anger will come, and you may lose them also forever. So very, very, very difficult to have a proper guru-disciple relationship. Krishna is therefore the original spiritual master of the science of Bhagavad Gita, and Arjuna is the first disciple for understanding the Gita. How Arjuna understands the Bhagavad Gita is stated in the Gita itself, yet foolish mundane scholars explain that one need not submit to Krishna as a person, but to the unborn within Krishna. So there's a lot of discussion, there's lots of different, just like in Christianity, there's so many different sects. There are various sects, many impersonal sects, that don't see Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They see themselves all as being able to be the Supreme Person. It's called impersonalism, where they just view the Paramatma, or the form of God within their heart, as being the same throughout, and that you can be God just the same as anyone else can be God. Very impersonalist approach. So they don't see Krishna, his body and form, as being spiritual. They're worshiping the God that they think they have within themselves, the same way that Krishna has the same form of God within him. But this is just not a correct view, according to at least Gaudiya Vaishnavism. One who has no sense of this understanding is the greatest fool in trying to understand Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, so Bhagavad Gita isn't going to work necessarily if you're reading the entire thing thinking that you yourself are capable of becoming God, and that Krishna himself isn't. Because one, why would you even want to read a book that isn't given from the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself? And two, you're going to end up reading the entire scripture trying to find knowledge of basically how you can become powerful like Krishna. And with the complete miserly Kripana mindset that is being discussed, particularly in this verse, most people will read the Bhagavad Gita and even translate the Bhagavad Gita from a miserly perspective of what can I get from this in terms of sense gratification. And that's the total opposite point of Bhagavad Gita. So if you do have that perspective on Krishna, or that perspective trying to read Bhagavad Gita, you're unfortunately going to read it very differently from how a devotee would. So text 8. I can find no means to drive away the grief which is drying up my senses. So I hadn't read this verse, but this is exactly what I was discussing. So we have these triggers, these things that happen, and our locus of control is disturbed, our sense gratification is disturbed, the mind becomes very disturbed, and the mind will lock up. And now you need the mind to engage your senses in order to do things in the material world, and the mind will utilize the intelligence. But if the mind is unhappy, then you're not really capable of doing anything yet, and you have to pacify the mind through your intelligence before it will re-engage in its activities, whether transcendental or material. So this is what has happened now here with Arjun. He's at that point where he is emotionally distraught and pretty much the mind is incapable of functioning at the moment. So he doesn't know how to drive away the grief, and it's drying up my senses. So why are the senses dried up? Well, because the mind is not capable of engaging him at the moment. The mind is very overwhelmed with grief and this miserly weakness where it's just all about him right now and his attachments to his family, and he doesn't know what to do. So he's pretty much useless at the moment. He's incapable of doing anything. I will not be able to destroy it, even if I win an unrivaled kingdom. So even if he could get his mind activated, even if he could find a reason to go out and kill his family members and win sovereignty over his kingdom and the earth and act like, a demigod in heaven, then he's saying to him that's the highest thing that he could achieve through this battle. And that's not enough to satisfy my mind in this particular case either. Nothing that I have thought about that I have access to is able to protect my mind and allow me to go out and do what you're asking me to do. Purport. Although Arjun was putting forward so many arguments based on knowledge of the principles of religion and moral codes, it appears that he was unable to solve his real problems without the help of the spiritual master. So Prabhupada's saying, well, he had access to so much knowledge. He was such an advanced devotee already. But even he was unable to solve a real world problem without access to a spiritual master. Now, this is kind of a principle that people use in the material world anyways. A lot of people who are great at things, they will still require an outside perspective because you get too close to things sometimes. So you always need someone there that you can trust, that you can reveal your mind to, who can set you on the right path and just say, hey, like you are missing this thing, or maybe you should look at things like this, or maybe you can do things like that. So you'll find even the most famous people in the world, they have teams and teams of people around them to constantly reassess and help them to see how they can be better as well. And the reason that they're successful is that they're able to take that criticism and turn it into positives as well. So it is very handy if you can find people that are more advanced to you to take their association. And, the concept of a spiritual master doesn't always have to be someone that is perfectly realized. The concept of a spiritual master, too, can be small baby steps where you're finding people that aren't fully transcendental, but they have more knowledge than you. And, you can stay a little guarded because they're not going to be, perfect entities that can fully help you become realized, but they can teach you many different things that you don't know. So you have to be like a swan where you're able to kind of filter out the milk from water, filter out different things and just take the good and leave the bad and learn that discerning quality of taking shiksha from different people and slowly using that deductive reasoning as well to kind of put the pieces together yourself and to chant and ask for Krishna's help and mercy. He could understand that his so-called knowledge was useless in driving away his problems, which were drying up his whole existence, and it was impossible for him to solve such perplexities without the help of a spiritual master. So that's the same thing we've all discussed. No need to reiterate that. Academic knowledge, scholarship, high position, etc. are all useless in solving the problems of life. So any scientist would hold great issue with that statement because how many people spend their time getting PhDs and masters and trying to be the best in their fields and protect the environment and figure out this scientific improvement to heal the body or live longer or remove this disease or remove that. So they all truly do think that through that process that they will be able to solve the problems of life. The hilarious thing is that if you've ever, again, used deductive reasoning and looked at every cause and effect over, the past few thousand years of everything that they're doing, or even the past couple years with COVID, the cause and effect is always that they try to fix one problem and they make 10 more, because we have imperfect senses and we're not capable of understanding all the different ways that the material world works. So when you make a small little ripple in the water, that ripple sometimes radiates out so far and for so long, you don't know the effects of putting one drop of water in there. One little movement to the ecosystem has catastrophic effects, and we don't know all of the ins and outs of the material world. So a simple thing that can, you think, oh, well, we've done this to solve this problem. And you've seen this too, so many ecosystems. So many countries have brought in multiple different animals thinking, oh, well, this is not a native animal to our country, but it will solve this problem of the overpopulation of this particular animal. So we'll bring in this animal to control it and keep it down. Every single time that anyone has ever done that has caused huge issues, because then the whole ecosystem ends up having multiple issues because of this new species. And then the species itself usually becomes an issue too, because they don't have any natural predators or different things like that. So when you really think about it, unfortunately, Kripanas, miserly materialistic people, are generally very ill-informed and have much higher regard for their knowledge and abilities to manipulate the material world than they actually can. And they also produce a lot of propaganda into the material world in the form of news and media and social media to make people think that they actually have far more power than they actually do. And in fact, they spend a lot of time trying to make you think that they have a lot more power over you as well. The hilarious thing about it is that if you don't associate with it and you don't give it power, then they cease to really have control over you, because they don't control the material world, and they can make every little adjustment to try to rein everyone in and put everyone on this medication, or control their money, or control their movements, or control their cars, or whatever they're trying to do at the time that they think is, going to gratify their senses. If you don't actually care to give any of it, so again, those things will only produce an effect to Kripanas, people who are miserly and concerned about their own sense gratification. When you remove your idea of, well, I don't want this person to affect my ability to do what I think I should be doing, you are also being miserly, because you're still on the material platform of just fighting like cats and dogs. Well, this person, my mom's telling me that I can't go and do this. And then, immediately the child wants to try to figure out how to do the thing that they're told not to do. And even more funny is that the mom in this particular case is the sole provider for the child, and yet what the child was given was provided by the parent, and then when the parent takes it away, the child thinks that it's theirs or their property or their right to it, but the person provided it in the first place. So a lot of things in the material world are produced by all of these scientists and airplanes and things, and they produce a lot of this stuff for us to consume, and then they take it away sometimes and we can't consume it, but we didn't produce them in either case, so we didn't really have a right to them in the first place. And the interesting thing is that none of this matters, because if you're not really attached to the process of trying to do what you think you should be doing, it doesn't matter. Like you've been used to driving certain places for 100 years, and then they say you can't drive. Well, people didn't drive for thousands of years before. So they're just these weird little rights that we all of a sudden think that we're entitled to, when they're just little drops in the ocean and little waves that are radiating out. Things will constantly change in the material world, and we always have to be willing to go with those. If you're not, you're going to constantly get stuck in this process of fighting against the material world and trying to hold on to the things that you think you want and trying to get rid of the things that you think you don't need. Let's see. So academic knowledge, yeah, useless in solving the problem. So I mean, that whole process is useless. The attachments to all that are useless, and getting too wrapped up in thinking that you're going to fix something that is designed to be impermanent and broken in the first place is hilarious. I mean, and it's sad because when you really think about it, if you accept this knowledge, then there's really no point to any of what people are doing. And I mean, I run my businesses and I spend a lot of time on them and I like doing it. But for me, it's kind of coming to a point where I just do it because I like to do it. And I mean, I don't have anything else to do. I spend a lot of time, on my Mridanga stuff and making these videos and cooking and offering my food to Krishna as well. Like, we have to do something. The senses must always be engaged in different things. So the only reprieve that you have is what your consciousness is during those and why you're actually doing those things. Other than that, the activities of devotees and everyone are all generally the same. It really only comes down to the consciousness behind it. And we'll discuss this much more in depth when we get to karma yoga and why karma yoga is so important to devotees and how it really plays in, especially into grihastha life as well. So yes, can give us yes. Therefore, the conclusions of the spiritual master who is 100. Okay, all right, Prabhupada. So here, spiritual master who is 100% Krishna conscious is the bona fide spiritual master, for he can solve the problems of life. So now he's made a statement that I just can't ignore, unfortunately. Nor can anyone else in ISKCON or any, so-called spiritual society or cult or however you want to label it. But yes, I mean, the sad statement is that, here we're getting the perfect knowledge given from Krishna to Arjuna, the perfect disciple, the perfect spiritual master. Unfortunately, in the material world, to find a spiritual master who is 100% Krishna conscious and is considered a bona fide spiritual master, probably zero at the moment. Maybe there's some people, but they're not exactly going to be at the forefront of a movement being pestered by young millennials about, which woman they should marry or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? So here, we really have to rely a lot on scripture at the moment because there aren't a lot of bona fide people that we can really take shelter with. And even if they were with 50,000 disciples, how are you capable of getting one-on-one association, where they're going to give you a book of knowledge like this, in hours at a time? It's not going to happen. So we must read every day and accept this knowledge as much as we can. Lord Chaitanya said that one who is master in the science of Krishna consciousness, regardless of his social position, is the real spiritual master. So it doesn't matter who you are, what your social position is, how many vaccines you've designed or whatever. If you really, truly have mastered Krishna consciousness, then you are the real spiritual master. And it doesn't matter what position you have or if anyone even knows that, but you are a bona fide spiritual master. Quotations here. Does not matter whether a person is a learned scholar in Vedic wisdom or is born in a lower family or in the renounced order of life. If he is master in the science of Krishna, he is the perfect and bona fide spiritual master. So worth over birth doesn't matter if you're born a Shudra, you don't have to be born Brahmin, you don't have to be born in a specific caste, family, you don't have to be doing certain things, you don't have to be learned. You don't even have to be in the renounced order of life. You don't even have to be a sannyasi. If you have perfect bona fide knowledge, then you are a spiritual master. And that's interesting too, because ISKCON has this whole red tape and process of, stamping people. Okay, well, so and so people have viewed his behavior for so many years, and he's been on the waiting list to be a sannyasi for 5 years, and he's attended Mangalarti for so many hundreds of days in a row. And, he's jumped through so many of the hoops and different things that they give. So now he is a bona fide spiritual master. No, this actually is saying the complete opposite. Doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what people think, doesn't matter what position you hold. If you are a spiritual master, then you are a spiritual master. There's no rubber stamping required. And people will know who a spiritual master is when they meet them. And I've met a lot of sannyasis and spent quite a bit of time intimately with them and eaten with them. And I can assure you, I have not really met anyone that I would consider a spiritual master in most regards. Unfortunately, even as a very young kid, in my early 20s, don't know anything. I was shocked at what I saw and shocked by the, personalities of most of these people in my dealings with them, to the point where I think it actually drove me more to be Krishna conscious, just because it was so shocking from what I was reading in the books to the people that I was meeting. And I would just openly kind of rip them too to their face and be like, what the hell is wrong with you people? Like, why aren't you acting like this? Or why aren't you, you know, whatever, displaying such and such symptoms, and like all these things I was seeing? It was just so contradictory. And it kind of pushed me more and more towards my Krishna consciousness, because I just wanted to know, like, what the hell is going on here? Like, this doesn't make any sense. I'm so perplexed right now. Um, I must continue forward so that I can figure out the answers for myself, at least. And they didn't have the answers either. Like, you'd speak to them, and it was pretty useless, unfortunately. So without being a master in the science of Krishna consciousness, no one is a bona fide spiritual master. Okay. A scholarly Brahmana, expert in all subjects of Vedic knowledge, is unfit to become a spiritual master without being a Vaishnava or expert in the science of Krishna consciousness. Yes, so just being scholarly, Brahminical, being able to do so much Vedic mantras, a lot of Brahminical behavior is more karmakanda stuff, pardon me, more based on rituals, sacrifices, fire sacrifices, things like this, was very important at one particular point, but people are not actually born and pure brahmanas anymore. Most people are born shudras, and without actually coming to the standard of being a correct Vaishnav who is pure through and through and understands Krishna consciousness, the Brahminical qualities are not to be worshipped and not necessarily useful in this day and age as well. And you don't need to be a Brahmana to be a spiritual master or anything else. But as you attain transcendental nature and become, expert in Krishna consciousness, then you automatically are a Brahmana as well, So this is already understood. But a person born in a family of a lower caste can become a spiritual master if he is a Vaishnava or Krishna consciousness. Yeah, so, in, traditional kind of Vedic realms, you're born Brahmin, you can't move through your castes or creeds. In, in India, they just think that they're born a certain way. They don't have a concept of upgrading. So if you're born in a Shudra class, then you just act like a Shudra your whole life, and you're not given the ability to learn Vedic wisdom and to be seen in society as being a Brahmana. In Vaishnavism, you're seen as being able to be born in any situation and completely remove, repair, and heal your consciousness so that you can purify and come up to a standard far and above being a Brahmana, but actually transcendental, and ultimately to leave this material world And as Prabhupada always says, go back to Godhead. And we'll discuss this concept of back as well and why he's using that all the time. But that's another discussion. Let's see here. The problem of material existence: birth, old age, disease, and death. So we have these problems. The material existence, as we were saying, you have to be born, you have to be stuck in a sack for however many months, unable to move, kicking, bound up in, apparently, as they describe, immense, untold amounts of pain, and also keeping your consciousness so that you can remember your past lives, your past karmas, why you have been reborn in whatever form you're getting at the time, and constantly repenting and speaking with the Paramatma and offering prayers and obeisances and wondering why he has to go or she has to go, or whichever animal it's being born as has to go through this pain and suffering again. The moment, and they're aware, apparently, that jiva in whatever animal or human form is fully aware of its suffering while it's in the, forming stages before it comes into the material world. So as it's being formed, let's say in a woman, then that baby is, just think about being wrapped up into that tiny little amniotic sac, being incapable of moving, stretching, just be unbelievable amounts of pain. And then they come out being pressed and squeezed for 8, 10, 15 hours, forcibly dragged out by their head or feet or however it works, screaming and crying. Why do you think they're screaming? I mean, so the second that they come out, apparently Maya takes hold. Everything that they were experiencing, aware of, it's all completely shrouded. And they start off as a newborn baby with no conception of anything again, except all of their samskars that they travel with and all of their karmas that they travel with through their subtle body. But aside from that, they're not going to have any memories whatsoever, generally speaking. Some people do have memories of previous lives, but in general, yes, you have to suffer so much through birth, old age again. As one rapper was just saying, he just made a song about how you're young twice, basically. So you're young, and then you live your life, and you're an older person, and then once you get quite old again, you're literally like a young baby again, because you just have no recollection of what's going on. Or like my grandmother, she has no short-term personality or short-term memory, sorry. So every day she's just living and existing in the moment, essentially, like a child with no concept of really what's going on. She's not able to think or lament about, what she did or what other people did to her. So you almost like become a child again. So old age isn't fun. Disease, horrible. You're never going to get rid of disease, because it's stated that old age, birth, death, disease are part of the problems of the material world. So they're going to try always to remove disease, but the body is always going to get diseased and have different problems. And ultimately death also comes for everyone. And the hilarious thing, as they say about Maya, is that no matter how many times people are seeing death, contacting death, have people die around them, they themselves never think that they're going to die. For me, I mean, I don't really ever think about it, because I think the only scary thing about death is not scary, but again, it's that miserly behavior of having to experience pain. The death part, we die every night, we're asleep, we're not here, we're not conscious. To go through that is not anything scary. And you wake up and you start your material world, events again. But so I don't think people fear death. I think people fear the suffering involved in death, or the untold amounts of suffering that the body can produce through, horrible diseases, or car accidents or things where you're just suffering like anything. A lot of that as well is going to come down to your karma. So many people, especially in Krishna consciousness, unless it's something that's going to help them in the Krishna consciousness, or a lesson that they need to learn, or some small amounts of suffering that they need to go through for some reason, we're able to remove a lot of our karmas and past karmas through chanting Hare Krishna. So you won't find a lot of devotees necessarily suffering in those particular ways. I don't see a lot of things like that. A lot of people, you know, are not going through some of the things that a lot of people have to. But we always have to be prepared for those things. And I think just the pain is mostly what people are afraid of, or they're just very attached still to their family and they don't want to die, and they have so many material things that they want to do. I mean, I'm only 37, and already the material world seems rather boring and kind of useless. I mean, there's not really that much that you can do here, and the more advanced you become in Krishna consciousness too, the easier kind of seeing and doing things are. So the challenges of doing things aren't necessarily there either, because seeing the threads of things, seeing and understanding how to achieve things, um, become more visible. Like before, I used to always wonder, like, well, how can people do this, and how are they like that? And there's two processes. Like, one, people have karmas that just force them into these positions of being good at things or bad. But two, if you're somewhat transcendental, then you can actually augment and change your karmas, and all of a sudden you see the process and the way to get to wherever you need to go. And that's why they say that the Vaishnava becomes expert in everything. Now, why are they being expert in everything? Because they've transcended their karmas. They've transcended the things that block them from being able to see the paths to higher positions materially and spiritually. Once you remove those blocks, and once you remove Maya's kind of hold on you and the karmas that are forcing you, still there's going to be some, but you have a lot more ability to kind of do whatever you want in the material world. Now, that's a good thing and a bad thing, but the worst thing about it is that it becomes kind of boring, because a lot of our time materially is spent pining over what other people have, because we're very miserly, right? So people love to pine over what other people have and try to achieve the same results and feel that sense of pride. Like, wow, like I beat that person, or I became the best at this, or I became the best at that. But with Krishna at the center and having the unique ability to augment your karmas quite easily, there really isn't that much to do in the material world. Like, how many ways can you set things up to make money? And then when you have enough money, money ceases to really have any importance. You can just buy whatever you want when you want, eat out, different things. Like, there's no sense gratification from that process anymore. It doesn't exist anymore. You can set up so many different businesses. They're all the same way, the same systems. You deduce all the same. Like, the system of making money is just the same. And once you learn that system, you can apply it to anything. So it becomes kind of boring. So there's just, there's not a lot to draw from the material world. So if you're not staying Krishna conscious and trying to work on that particular aspect, which actually is an extremely tall and difficult task to navigate, that's really the only thing that kind of holds my interest, and seeing all of the different ways that I get pushed around the material world. I have to allow it to happen, because I'm not capable of, as we said, only through Krishna's mercy can Maya not touch us. So that's very interesting to me. But all of the rest of it is, even if I engage in it, it's kind of interesting, but it definitely loses its luster pretty quickly. So for a Krishna conscious person, you're not having the same power and desires that these academics have, these people of high positions that are all trying to kind of fix the material world and draw so much sense gratification from it. So at birth, death, old age, and disease, they cannot be counteracted by accumulation of wealth and economic development. No, I mean, they can't. You can't fix it. Doesn't matter how much you accumulate, how much economic development, it's never going to fix these things. And because people don't trust in the Bhagavad Gita, because people don't trust in themselves, in spiritual practice, or trust in Krishna or God, they think that if they just fix this, then we'll be able to do this. We'll be able to upload our consciousness into some computer and make just like embryos, and then upload and download our consciousness back into the body, and it will be us or function like us. Or even if that was the case, still a separate jiva would most likely have to take that body with that consciousness, which would be very, I don't know what's the word, congruent, not congruent, I'm not sure, but it would be very disconnected. Or worse yet, you would somehow force the same jiva that had to leave the old body and lock him constantly into a cycle of being in different bodies with relatively the same memories and consciousness, and these different bodies, and it would seem like very hellish, but again, not a permanent situation. Nothing's permanent. Resources of this world are not permanent. Whatever systems they set up will eventually fail, and you will have to re-enter the material sphere in whatever way is the next step for you. So it's all very interesting if you think about it. Let's see where we're at here. Kind of be counteracted in many parts of the world. There are states which are replete with all facilities of life, which are full of wealth and economically developed, yet the problems of material existence are still present. Yeah, they are seeking peace in different ways, but they can achieve real happiness only if they consult Krishna or the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which constitute the science of Krishna, or the bona fide representative of Krishna, the man in Krishna consciousness. What? Oh, yes, I see. If economic development and material comforts could drive away one's lamentation for family, social, national, or international inebrieties, then Arjuna would not have said that even an unrivaled kingdom on earth, or a supremacy like that of the demigods and the heavenly planets, would not be able to drive away his lamentations. So that's a good point. So Arjuna was saying, even if he was literally given everything, the whole world, living like a demigod, reigning over the whole world through winning this war, it still wouldn't allay his, sense of demise at the moment. So if material comforts and economic development could actually drive away one's lamentation, then that would be great. And that's what everyone thinks it will do. But as I just said, it actually does the opposite. So you become, because you have more time to focus on other things, when you're not constantly absorbed in trying to make money, and when you have enough money, and when you understand your systems for making money and become expert in your job and different things, life actually becomes much easier, and you don't have to, there's more space in your mind now to hold other thoughts and ideas. And, unfortunately, when you have more space, you start to realize how empty the material sphere is. And that's why a lot of these musicians, they have a lot of pride, they're very happy, they're very focused and absorbed in their shot up to fame and making their hundreds of millions of dollars. But then once they have all of that, they don't have much left, because they don't know what to do with themselves. They become isolated, lonely. They actually don't have any real relationships or friends. All of the problems that they actually have manifest even more, because there's nothing now to distract them from those things, because they've already reached all of their kind of material goals. And now spiritually, they're just left with nothing. And it's a very sad situation. A lot of people end up kind of crumbling, or they end up giving up their fame too, because they think that their fame is what's taking the toll on them. But it's not actually the fame, it's just that they're not spiritually adequate and they don't know how to have proper interactions with the material world and other people. Economic development or supremacy over the world can be finished at any moment by the cataclysms of material nature. So this is what a lot of people are wrestling with right now. Economic development or supremacy can be finished at any moment. So a lot of people are worried about their money, about the banking systems, about the WEF, about having a universal income or basic income, or the government saying you can't spend money on this or that, or you don't have any money anymore, or whatever it's going to be. A lot of people have issue with that. But here, Prabhupada's saying, the economic development and supremacy that we hold over the world at any time can be taken from us at any second. Again, if you are constantly trying to maintain your locus of control over what you think you should have, you're always going to be sad. You're always going to be depressed. You're always going to have issue with everyone and everything, because they're not giving you what you think that you need or want. Now, we never have that control, and sometimes the material world does give us kind of what we want or need at certain times, and that's great. But the times that it isn't, you have to hold true to your faith, control the mind a little bit, and surrender unto Krishna, surrender unto the material world. Realize that you're not as powerful as Krishna, you're not as powerful as Maya. Whether you're transcendental or material, you don't have any reign over this body. You don't have any reign over the material world particularly. Yes, you can get mystic siddhis and do different things, but ultimately, if you get a little too out of hand with those, Krishna also will take them from you, or kind of destroy you, as we see so much in the Bhagavatam. So you have to just accept. Part of Krishna consciousness is sitting back and simply accepting what the material world is giving. And the more transcendental you become means the less the mind worries about these things and attaches some type of sensory perception to them. They come, they go. We don't really worry about it. Like, all this effort that we've put in, like this concept of putting effort into something, and then you've worked so hard, but then you're going to lose your money or whatever. It's like, well, I mean, we're gonna die and lose everything anyways. And if I was working for money in the first place, then the whole point of being Krishna conscious is lost, because the only benefit that we get is your consciousness while you're doing things. So, all of these considerations, sadly enough, are incorrect and very, very dangerous to have and to hold, because they're just eating away at you and constantly kind of working away at your spiritual kind of advancement. And you just have to surrender and accept whatever comes your way. And that's the whole process of being a sannyasi and becoming a beggar, is just accepting whatever comes your way. You work, and you're not attached to the fruits of your actions. And not being attached to the fruits of your actions mean that you're not attached to the fruits of the material world in any way. Even elation into a higher planetary situation, as men are now seeking a place on the moon planet, can also be finished at one stroke. The Bhagavad-Gita confirms this. When the results of pious activities are finished, one falls down again from the peak of happiness to the lowest status of life. This is discussing the process of falling down and coming down from the heavenly planets, where your pious credits are being used and played out up there in untold amounts of pleasure and bliss, with no disease and no real birth and death the way that we experience here. But when those pious credits are finished, it's back down to the material sphere here for more suffering, unfortunately. Many politicians of the world have fallen down in that way. Such downfalls only constitute more causes for lamentation. Yeah, so like here, what we're talking about, especially when you get up so high. And I've noticed that too with my business. Once you achieve a certain level of success, you're always trying to maintain that or build upon it. And that's also not a reality, because a lot of times, things will get smaller or less, or you might lose your business, or the world might completely break, or resources might no longer be available. So you always have to be thinking ahead, and not being attached to things, and realizing, well, this is just a phase. And if you look back at your life too, there's been so many different phases and periods in your life too, and things don't always stay static and stay the same. So he's given the description of a politician where they fall down, or have some indiscretion or some issue, and then they're they're lamenting even more from that. So there's even more lamentation from achieving and then losing as well. Therefore, if we want to curb lamentation for good, beautiful segue here. Therefore, if we want to curb lamentation for good, then we have to take shelter of Krishna, as Arjuna is seeking to do. So Arjuna asks Krishna to solve his problems, definitely, and that is the way of Krishna consciousness. Yes, so if we really want to curb lamentation, we must take shelter of Krishna. There is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way. Hare Krishna.